Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a fascinating plunge into a concept that's, well, absolutely central to how businesses run smoothly: aggregate planning and supply chain management.
It really is.
Our mission for this deep dive is to really understand what aggregate planning is, why it's so vital for companies of all sizes, and how it actually plays out in the real world.
hmm
We've pulled all our insights from an excellent source, OpEx SCM Funda3 Planning.pdf by Vishnu Rayapeddi. So consider this your express route to grasping operational excellence.
Yeah, a shortcut almost.
Exactly, and mastering that critical balance between what customers demand and what a company can supply.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is that aggregate planning isn't just some, niche topic tucked away in operations.
Right.
It's really the fundamental bridge connecting a company's big picture strategic goals with its actual day-to-day operations.
Sure.
So whether you're prepping for a crucial meeting, maybe exploring a new field, or just genuinely curious about how companies optimize their vast resources, grasping this concept is incredibly valuable for you.
So aggregate planning. It sounds like a pretty big umbrella term. What's the core concept we need to grasp here? What are we actually talking about?
Well, essentially, it's about figuring out the quantity of production and the timing for that production over an intermediate future.
Okay, intermediate. So not next week, but not 5 years from now either.
Exactly. Typically looking out anywhere from, say, 3 to 18 months. And when we say aggregate, we mean it combines all sorts of production, often expressed in common, broader units.
Like what kind of units?
Think of it as a single measure, whether that's total hours, maybe dollars, or even something like full-time equivalent students if you're talking about a university's course capacity.
Interesting. So it's a rolled up view.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's definitely about juggling both how much capacity you have and what the demand looks like.
Right. So it's about that middle ground,
Yeah.
not too granular, not too high level. And I gather this is a major piece of the larger sales and operations planning, or S&OP, puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. It's a key output of S&OP. The goal here is to plan for each product family,
Okay.
maintain desired inventory levels,
Yeah.
figure out what resources are actually needed, and then constantly compare that required load against what you actually have available.
Constantly checking reality.
Yeah. The APEX dictionary sums it up beautifully, I think. It calls it setting the overall levels of manufacturing output and establishing production rates. It's really about setting that big rhythm for the business.
Given how critical this process sounds, what are the absolute fundamental requirements? What do you need to even begin with aggregate planning? What's on that checklist?
Well, yeah, to even get started properly, you really need 4 key things. First, a logical overarching unit to measure both your sales and your outputs. You need consistency there.
Okay, that common unit we talked about.
Exactly. Second, you need a solid forecast of demand in those aggregate units for your planning period. That forecast is crucial.
Makes sense.
Third, a clear method to determine all the associated costs, and I mean everything. Labor, inventory holding, hiring, firing,
It's a whole picture.
the whole cost picture. And finally, you need a model, some kind of framework that can combine those forecasts and costs, allowing you to actually make intelligent decisions.
Right. And like any good planning process, I assume it's also about setting clear goals.
Definitely. It's about setting goals, maybe meet demand within limits at the least cost.
Mm-hmm.
Then figuring out the steps, you maybe hire more workers, setting timelines, and assigning clear responsibilities. Pretty standard planning stuff, but applied here.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, then, these goals are all about optimizing resource allocation and ensuring business stability, right? I mean, what are the ultimate objectives of all this effort?
Yeah. The primary goals, fundamentally, are always to meet demand, use your capacity as efficiently as possible, stick to your inventory policy, and crucially, to minimize cost.
And minimizing cost isn't just one thing, is it?
No, absolutely not. That cost minimization breaks down into a few key buckets: labor costs, inventory costs, plant and equipment utilization costs, and even subcontracting costs if you use that.
And I guess these can pull in different directions.
That's what's fascinating. They often do. You might save on labor costs by building up inventory ahead of time,
Yeah.
but then you incur higher holding costs. Or you could use overtime, but that has premium costs. It's always about finding that optimal balance, that sweet spot where you're not just meeting demand, but doing it in the most cost-effective way possible.
I see. And to achieve that, the material mentions using mathematically based aggregate planning models. That sounds pretty sophisticated. What does it actually take? to implement something like that? It doesn't sound like, a weekend project.
Oh, it's absolutely not a small undertaking. Implementing those kinds of models requires a pretty significant investment in three critical areas. First, time, just sheer time.
Time for what exactly?
Well, time for clearly defining the problem you're solving, developing the model itself, rigorously verifying that it actually works as intended, and then, of course, its ongoing application and maintenance.
Okay, so significant time. What else?
Second, expertise. This isn't just about having smart people. You need people who deeply understand the business problem you're trying to solve.
The context.
Right, the context. And then you need specialists who understand both the modeling process and the specific mathematical model being used. It's often a team effort.
And the third leg of that stool?
Predictably, money. All of this requires funding, often for several people working diligently for several months, maybe longer.
So time, expertise, money. Why invest so much? What's the payoff?
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? Why invest so much? Because the potential savings and the efficiencies gained from truly effective aggregate planning can be monumental. They can dwarf that initial investment, making it incredibly worthwhile in the long run.
That investment is certainly understandable when you consider the scale of planning involved. Okay, so if we know what it takes to set up these sophisticated models, let's look at how do companies actually execute aggregate planning? Our material talks about pure strategies, which seem to fall into two main buckets: changing capacity and changing demand. Let's maybe start with adjusting capacity.
Right. Good place to start. When we think about adjusting capacity, there are several key levers companies can pull. One very common one is changing inventory levels. Build it up, draw it down.
Using inventory as a buffer.
Exactly. The big advantage here is that you can make gradual changes to your workforce, right? Avoid sudden hiring sprees or layoffs. But the downsides are significant. You incur holding costs for all that extra inventory, and if you misjudge, you could face lost sales from shortages. This option obviously primarily applies to businesses that produce physical goods.
Okay, so inventory buffering. What else can they do with capacity?
Another major option is varying workforce size through hiring or layoffs, just directly matching your labor to demand.
The hire fire approach.
Essentially, yeah. This can directly match your labor to demand, potentially avoiding other less desirable alternatives. However, it comes with very real costs: hiring costs, training costs, and especially the significant financial and morale impact of layoffs. This is typically used more in industries where a large, accessible labor pool is available.
And what if you want to keep your core workforce stable but still need to adjust capacity? Is there a way?
Yes, then you look at varying production capacity using overtime or idle time, basically asking your existing workforce to work more, or sometimes less.
Flexing the hours.
Right. This is excellent for matching, say, seasonal fluctuations without the disruption and cost of hiring and firing. But you'll pay overtime premiums, you risk employee burnout, and if demand truly spikes, you still might not meet it. It offers good flexibility for maybe smaller adjustments.
Okay. What else is in the capacity toolkit?
Then there's subcontracting. This means bringing in outside firms to help produce your goods or components.
Outsourcing some of the work.
Precisely. It offers fantastic flexibility and helps smooth out your internal output, keeps things level inside your own walls. But the trade-offs are real. You could lose some quality control, see reduced profits because the subcontractor needs their margin, and even risk losing future business if you become too reliant or share sensitive info. It's mostly a play for manufacturing settings, usually.
Interesting how each capacity strategy has its own set of trade-offs. It's never a free lunch. And what about using part-time workers? Is that another lever?
Yes, absolutely. Using part-time workers can be less costly per hour, maybe, and offer more flexibility than full-time hires. You can scale them up and down more easily.
But there must be downsides.
Oh, definitely. The flip side is potentially high turnover, ongoing training costs because people come and go, maybe quality issues, plus the sheer headache of scheduling lots of part-timers. It's usually best suited for less skilled jobs where a large pool of temporary labor is readily available.
So across all these capacity options, the common thread seems to be trading off costs, labor, inventory, outsourcing against the flexibility needed to meet fluctuating demand.
That's a great way to put it. Each choice carries its own specific set of risks and rewards. You're always balancing.
That makes perfect sense. So we've talked about adjusting what you can supply. What about influencing demand itself? Can companies actually shift customer behavior to better fit their capacity? Is that feasible?
Absolutely. It's the other side of the coin. One approach is directly influencing demand through things like pricing, promotions, advertising, or special offers.
Trying to lure people in during slow periods.
Exactly. The goal is to utilize any excess capacity you might have, perhaps with discounts to bring customers in during off-peak times. But it introduces uncertainty,
Mm,
because it's notoriously difficult to perfectly predict how customers will react and match demand to supply exactly.
yeah, predicting behavior is tough.
It is. This often sparks creative marketing campaigns. And it's why some businesses, like airlines or hotels, might use tactics like overbooking, assuming some people won't show up.
Ah, like airlines, for instance. That makes sense now.
Precisely. Then there's back ordering, especially during high demand periods.
So taking the order but making the customer wait.
Yes, it means taking an order even if you don't have the product immediately available so the customer waits. The advantage is that it can help you avoid costly overtime and keep your production capacity nice and constant.
But the downside?
So you risk losing customer goodwill, or even the sale altogether if the wait is too long. Still, many companies do this, particularly when lead times are generally expected in that industry.
Okay. Any other demand-shaping tricks?
Well, there's a really clever one, counter-seasonal product mixing.
Counter-seasonal, like selling opposite things.
Exactly. You add products or services with demand patterns that are the opposite of your existing ones. Think a company that sells lawnmowers in the summer.
And snow blowers in the winter.
You got it. This allows you to potentially fully utilize your resources, your factory, your workforce, and maintain a stable workforce year-round. The disadvantage, though, is that it might require totally new skills or equipment outside your core expertise, and finding truly opposite, complementary demand patterns can be quite a challenge. It's not always easy to find that perfect match.
That's a really insightful way to think about it, not just reacting to demand, but actively shaping it or smoothing it out. Now, our source material also outlines 4 core production strategies: chase, level, subcontracting, and hybrid. These sound like the practical blueprints for how companies execute all those capacity and demand options we just discussed.
That's right, they're the overarching approaches, sort of the master plans. The chase strategy, often called demand matching, is pretty literal.
How so?
Your production level literally chases demand up and down. You vary your output rate to meet sales exactly. The big advantage is you keep stable, low inventory levels.
Sounds good, but what's the catch?
The downsides are significant. The constant costs of hiring, training, maybe overtime, extra shifts when demand is high, and then the cost and serious morale impact of layoffs when demand drops. Plus, your capacity, your maximum potential output, has to be able to ramp up to meet that peak demand, which can be expensive infrastructure.
So, highly flexible in output, but potentially very expensive and disruptive in terms of labor and churn. What's the opposite end of that spectrum?
That would be the level strategy. Here, you maintain a steady, constant production rate regardless of demand fluctuations.
Just keep chugging along at the same pace.
Pretty much. The huge advantage is avoiding all those fluctuating labor and capacity costs you see in the chase strategy. It generally leads to lower average production costs per item because you're running efficiently.
But there's always a but.
The critical disadvantage, however, is a potential buildup of inventory when demand is low, or stockouts when demand is high if you didn't build enough. And it absolutely demands a very, very accurate forecast.
Ah, that accurate forecast really is the hidden key there, isn't it? If you get that wrong, the whole level benefit kind of disappears.
Exactly. It's the linchpin for the level strategy. If your forecast is significantly off, you're either drowning in inventory carrying costs or facing lost sales from stockouts.
Okay, so chase and level are the extremes. What about subcontracting as a strategy?
Right. The subcontracting strategy is where you decide to meet the fluctuations in demand primarily by outsourcing.
Hmm.
You might keep your internal production fairly level, maybe covering your base demand, and then subcontract anything above that.
So you let someone else handle the peaks?
Essentially, yes. Advantages include not needing to invest in or maintain excess internal capacity yourself and keeping your own production relatively stable. The downsides are the costs of subcontracting, which can be higher per unit than producing in-house, and the potential risk to proprietary technology or processes if you're outsourcing core activities.
Got it. And finally, the hybrid strategy. This sounds like a mix and match approach, trying to get the best of both worlds.
It is, precisely. A hybrid strategy is really a combination of the others. Often, it involves producing at or near full capacity for part of the cycle when demand is high, and then maybe at a lower but still level rate for another part of the cycle.
So different levels, but level within periods.
Exactly. The production itself remains level within those segments. This approach aims to reduce both the massive inventory buildup you might see in a pure level strategy and the extreme workforce adjustment costs of a pure chase strategy.
But it probably still needs a good forecast.
Oh, absolutely. Like the level strategy, it also relies heavily on an accurate forecast to work effectively. You need to know when to switch between those production levels.
And tying into these strategies, we also see make-to-stock production mentioned in the material. How does that fit into this picture?
Make to stock isn't so much a strategy like chase or level, but more a description of the production environment where these strategies are often applied. It's when goods are produced based on a forecast, ahead of actual customer orders, and then sold from existing inventory.
Ah, so you make it hoping someone will buy it.
Basically, yes. This model is ideal when you have fairly consistent and predictable demand, maybe not too many product options or variations, and a very short customer expected fulfillment lead time compared to the actual time it takes you to manufacture the product.
And what info do you need for that?
For this, you absolutely need that forecast broken down by time period, a clear understanding of your opening inventory levels, and what your desired ending inventory levels are for each period. Your planning inventory, essentially.
It really highlights how the level and chase strategies represent those two extreme poles, doesn't it?
It really does. And the hybrid strategies are all about finding that clever, flexible middle ground, trying to capture some benefits of each while mitigating the biggest drawbacks.
So we've looked at the different strategies, the conceptual approaches, but how do businesses actually calculate these complex plans day to day or month to month? Our material talks about both graphical and mathematical approaches. How do those compare?
Yeah, they definitely both have their place. Graphical and charting techniques are incredibly popular, especially historically, because they're relatively easy to understand and often rely on a bit of, well, trial and error.
Visualizing the plan.
Exactly. The process typically involves laying out your forecast demand, determining your capacity across regular time, overtime, and maybe subcontracting options, calculating all your associated costs, labor, hiring, firing, inventory holding, back orders considering company policies or constraints, and then simply developing different alternative plans and examining their total costs, often visually on a chart.
Like plotting cumulative demand versus cumulative production.
Precisely. The material even shows a cumulative demand graph for Plan 1, which beautifully illustrates the forecast requirements against, say, a level production plan. It makes concepts like reduction of inventory during low demand and excess inventory buildup really tangible and easy to graph.
That visual approach sounds incredibly intuitive, especially for explaining it to others. But for more complex scenarios or finding the absolute best plan, I imagine the math comes in.
Exactly. That's where mathematical approaches really shine. They aim for optimization, not just a good enough solution. Examples mentioned include the transportation method of linear programming, linear decision rules, the management coefficients model, and simulation.
Okay, can you briefly contrast those? How do they differ?
Sure. When you compare these methods, the charting graphical method, as we said, is that trial and error approach. It's simple, easy to use, visual, and can generate many potential solutions. But the one you pick might not necessarily be the absolute mathematically optimal one. The transportation method is a classic optimization approach, usually using linear programming.
LP?
Right, LP. It's powerful because you can use specialized optimization software to find the provably best solution within a given set of constraints, and it even allows for what-if or sensitivity analysis quite easily. The main caveat is that its underlying assumption of linear cost functions might not always perfectly reflect real-world complexities where costs might jump non-linearly. Then there's the management coefficient model. This is what's called a heuristic approach.
Heuristic?
Essentially, it means it uses a practical, rule-of-thumb problem-solving method. It often tries to mimic how an experienced manager would intuitively make decisions based on past data. It's usually simpler to understand and implement than pure LP, and sometimes uses statistical tools like regression analysis to understand and replicate those past decision patterns. It tries to capture managerial wisdom mathematically.
Okay, this all sounds very relevant, maybe even essential for manufacturing, building cars or widgets or phones. But what about service firms, hospitals, hotels, airlines, banks? Did they use aggregate planning too, or is it a completely different ballgame for them?
Oh, absolutely they do. It might look a bit different because they aren't typically building physical inventory, but the core principles of balancing capacity and demand are just as crucial, if not more so, in services.
So how does it apply? What's the focus?
For service firms, the focus often shifts heavily towards controlling labor costs, as labor is frequently their largest variable cost and their primary source of capacity.
Makes sense. Staffing levels are key.
Exactly. So this means maintaining very close control of labor hours for quick response to demand changes, perhaps having on-call labor resources they can add or remove quickly, ensuring individual worker skills are flexible enough so people can be reallocated to where demand is highest, and maintaining flexibility in their rate of output or hours of operation, think extending hours during peak season.
That makes sense. Their inventory is often their capacity to deliver a service at a specific time, whether that's a hotel room for tonight, a seat on a plane, or a doctor's appointment slot.
Precisely. And that leads us directly to yield management, which our source highlights as a critical application of aggregate planning principles specifically for services.
Yield management, that sounds important. What is it?
It is. Yield management, sometimes called revenue management, is a highly sophisticated application of aggregate planning, particularly in service industries with fixed perishable capacity. Think airline seats, hotel rooms, rental cars.
Perishable meaning if you don't sell it by a certain time, the value disappears.
Exactly. An empty seat on a plane that just took off has zero value. So yield management is all about maximizing revenue from that fixed perishable capacity base.
What does it require to work well?
Well, it requires a few key things. First, you must have multiple pricing structures that are feasible and, importantly, appear logical to customers, different prices for different conditions or times. Second, you need a strong ability to forecast not just how many customers you'll have, but also the duration of their use if that's relevant, like a rental car. And third, you absolutely need the capability to manage changes in demand, often in real time, adjusting prices or availability.
That's where it gets really interesting, thinking about how they juggle different prices for essentially the same seat or room.
Yes, and our source material gives a great simple hotel example. Imagine a hotel just uses a single price level, say $150 per room. On a given night, they might sell 50 rooms and make $7,500. But they're likely leaving money on the table. They're passing up potential profit from customers who would have happily paid more than $150 and also losing revenue from customers who weren't willing to pay $150 but would have paid, say, $100.
Right, missed opportunities at both ends.
Exactly. By using two price levels, maybe charging $100 for some rooms booked early or non-refundable and $200 for last-minute or premium rooms, the hotel, in the example, could actually achieve $8,100 in total sales from the same number of rooms sold. That's a significant improvement in revenue and yield simply by better allocating capacity to different customer segments willing to pay different prices.
So it's about making sure every available unit of capacity, every room, every seat is earning its maximum potential revenue based on demand. And the yield management matrix in the source really helps visualize where different service industries fall in this landscape, doesn't it?
It does. It's a really useful mental model. It looks at predictability of use duration versus price variability.
Can you walk us through the quadrants?
Sure. Quadrant 1 is fixed price, predictable use duration. Think of venues like movie theaters, stadiums, arenas, convention centers, or maybe hotel meeting spaces. You generally know how many seats or how much space you have, the price is usually set, and the duration is fixed, length of movie, game, event. Quadrant 2 is variable price, predictable use duration. This is where you find those classic yield management examples. Hotels, airlines, rental cars, cruise lines. You have a fixed number of seats or rooms for a set duration, the flight, the night, the week. But you can dynamically change the price based on demand, booking time, and other factors.
The sweet spot for yield management.
Very much so. Then, quadrant 3 is fixed price, unpredictable use duration. Restaurants, golf courses, or maybe internet service providers fit here. Your pricing is fairly consistent, price per meal, per round, per month. But how many people show up, how long they stay, or how much bandwidth they use can be quite unpredictable. And finally, quadrant 4 is variable price, unpredictable use duration. Continuing care hospitals are given as a prime example here. Both the demand, how many patients, what conditions, and the pricing and reimbursement can fluctuate significantly, and the length of stay is often uncertain.
That matrix really helps illustrate how you can apply these core principles of balancing capacity and demand, managing that yield, even when you're not making physical products. It's clearly a core challenge across almost every type of industry.
Wow, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into aggregate planning. We went from its foundational requirements and goals all the way through the various strategies companies employ, chase, level, hybrid, and even looked at its critical application in service industries through yield management.
Yeah.
It's clear that it's a complex but, well, incredibly vital aspect of operational excellence for pretty much any business.
Absolutely. At its heart, aggregate planning is always about making smart, strategic decisions. It's about how to best meet customer demand with the available resources you have and doing it at the least possible cost, regardless of whether you're making widgets or selling hotel rooms. It's really the art of the possible within your operational constraints.
So what does this all mean for you as our listener? What's the takeaway? Well, maybe consider this provocative thought to mull over. In a world that seems to be constantly accelerating with increasing demands for customization, more volatile supply chains, and seemingly endless unpredictable global events, how might new technologies, things like advanced AI and machine learning, fundamentally reshape the challenges and methods of aggregate planning? Or will the core principles of balancing supply and demand, cost and service always remain the same, just perhaps executed with more sophisticated tools?
A fascinating question to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.